The rain had started long before dawn, not the kind of rain that falls softly and disappears after a few minutes. This one came with stubbornness, beating heavily on the rusted zinc roofs across the neighborhood like a tiny stones thrown from the sky. The gutters overflowed. Muddy water crawled across the neighborhood, and the wind carried the smell of wet earth into every corner. I sat at the edge of my bed, staring at my phone. No calls, no emails, no job alerts, nothing, just silence. And silence had become something I feared more than anything. I had just completed my youth service and returned to my state with big dreams and high hopes. During service year, I used to imagine how life would change immediately after NYSC. I believed once I finished serving my country, companies would be fighting to employ me. I imagined wearing clean office clothes, carrying a laptop bag, entering air-conditioned buildings, and finally becoming independent. But reality slapped me hard. Every morning became the same painful routine. Wake up, pray, search for jobs, apply, wait, get ignored. At first, I remained hopeful. I told myself it was normal. Everybody struggles at the beginning. But weeks slowly turned to months, and the hope inside me started dying little by little. I applied everywhere: banks, schools, hotels, oil firms, telecommunication companies, construction companies, even supermarkets. Sometimes I submitted over 100 applications in a single day. I became so desperate that I started visiting newspaper stands early in the morning just to read job advertisements because buying newspaper daily was too expensive for me. I would stand there for hours, pretending to read slowly while secretly copying addresses and applications into an old book. The newspaper vendor knew me already. "Young man, no job yet?" one of them would ask. I would force a smile. "Very soon, sir." But deep down, frustration was eating me alive. As a young man, constantly asking my father for money felt humiliating. Every time I needed transport fare or food money, shame burned inside my chest. My father never complained, not once, but I could see the threat in his eyes. I could see how hard he worked just to keep the family afloat. The wrinkles on his face seemed to deepen every day, and I hated myself for still depending on him. One evening, after another long day of unsuccessful job searching, I returned home exhausted and hungry. NEPA has taken light again. The house was dark, except for the weak lantern sitting on the dining table. My father was seated quietly, reading his Bible. He looked up as I entered. "How far?" he asked gently. I shook my head. "Nothing yet." He nodded slowly. God would do it. I wanted to believe him. I truly did. But at that moment, faith was becoming difficult. That night, I barely slept. I kept calculating my life in my head. My mates were getting jobs. Some were already getting married. Some had traveled abroad. Meanwhile, I was stuck. No income, no direction, no progress. Just endless applications and endless disappointment. Around 11 a.m. the next day, while I was helping my mother fetch water outside, my phone suddenly vibrated inside my pocket. I quickly pulled it out. Unknown number. My heart skipped. I opened the message immediately. "Dear applicant, you are invited for an interview with Sterling Petrochemical Resources Limited. The venue is Umuagwo Village in Imo State. Date on Friday, 1 p.m. I froze. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. An interview, finally. After hundreds of applications, I read the message again and again and again. It felt unreal. My mother noticed my expression immediately. What happened? I replied I got an interview invitation. She screamed in excitement. My father outside immediately. What is it? They invited me for an interview. For the first time in months, joy entered our home. My mother started thanking God loudly. My father smiled proudly. I cannot explain the happiness I felt that day. Suddenly, all the suffering felt worth it. I immediately began preparing. I polished my black shoes carefully, ironed my only good white shirt, arranged my certificate inside a brown envelope. I even borrowed transport money from my father because I didn't have enough. Everything felt like the beginning of a better life. But that happiness slowly began to fade the more I studied the address. Umuagwo village, Imo State, remote area. I had never heard of the place before. I asked around, but nobody seemed familiar with it. Some people even looked confused. Still, I ignored the fear. Opportunity does not always come easy, I told myself. Friday morning finally arrived. I woke up before dawn. The air was cold and quiet. My father placed his hands on my head before I left. My son, he said softly, wherever you go today, may God go with you. Amen, I replied. Then he prayed again. Longer this time, his voice carried unusual seriousness. At some point, he paused and looked directly into my eyes. Be careful. I nodded. I didn't know why those words would later echo inside my head repeatedly. I left the house around 5 a.m. and headed to the motor park. The park was already noisy. Bus conductors shouted destinations aggressively. Passengers dragged bags around. Hawkers moved from bus to bus selling bread, granules, soft drinks and boiled eggs. I finally entered the bus heading towards Imo State. The bus was old and overcrowded. The seat smells of sweat and dust. I squeezed myself beside an elderly woman, dressed in dirty wrappers. Her hair looked rough and uncombed, and she carried a strange smell around her body. At first, she said nothing. She simply stared ahead quietly. The driver started the engine, and the journey began. After about 30 minutes, everything remained normal. Then suddenly the old woman beside me began murmuring. At first, I thought she was praying. But after listening carefully, I realized she was insulting someone. I turned slightly. She was looking directly at me. Young foolish boy, she muttered. I frowned in confusion. Excuse me, ma. She hissed loudly. You are walking into darkness. My heart skipped. I forced a nervous laugh. Maybe she was mentally unstable. But then she continued. Death is calling people carelessly these days. I shifted uncomfortably. The passengers around us paid no attention. The woman suddenly began mumbling aggressively under her breath. Blood everywhere. Evil forest. Foolish children. Fear slowly crept into my chest. I tried ignoring her, but she kept talking. At one point, she turned sharply towards me and whispered, Turn back while you still can. Goosebumps covered my body immediately. I became restless. The atmosphere around me suddenly felt heavy. I tried praying silently inside my heart. The woman continued muttering strange things until we finally reached Imo State. The moment the bus stopped, I rushed out immediately, relieved to escape her presence. But strangely, her words remained inside my head. Turn back while you still can. I shook the thoughts away. Fear would not feed me. I needed that job. I asked several people for directions to Umuagwo village. Most people reacted strangely. Some stared at me suspiciously. "Why do you want to go there?" one man asked. "For interview," I replied. He looked at me for a few seconds without speaking. Another woman simply shook her head and walked away. My anxiety increased. Finally, one elderly man pointed towards a bike park. "You will find bike there. Go there, you will see them," he said. I thanked him and headed there immediately. The moment I mentioned Umuagwo village, the bike riders reacted instantly. No, no, no," one rider quickly said. "I can't go there." Another one shook his head. "That place no good." A third rider laughed nervously. "Brother, find another place go." I became frustrated. What is wrong with this place? Nobody answered. They simply avoided eye contact. Time was already going. It was past 3 p.m. I had traveled all the way already. Going back without trying felt impossible. Finally, one Hausa bike rider stopped and stepped forward. "I go carry you go there," he said. Relief washed over me immediately. I climbed behind him and we set out. The journey felt strange from the beginning. As we moved further away from the town, the environment slowly changed. The roads became narrower. Houses disappeared gradually. Bushes became thicker. Silence swallowed the area. Even the air felt different. The bike rider kept glancing back at me occasionally. "Oga," he said suddenly. "Who sent you come this place?" "Oil company interview, sir," I replied. He was quiet for a few seconds. Then he shook his head slowly. "No company dey here." My heartbeat increased. "What do you mean?" "This road no good." Fear crawled deeper into my chest. But we continued. The farther we traveled, the more isolated the road became. No people, no shops, no movement. Just endless lonely road, surrounded by thick forest. The evening sun was already fading gradually. At that point, every instinct inside me screamed that something was wrong. Finally, we reached the address. And the moment I saw the place, my blood ran cold. It was an abandoned building. Broken windows, cracked walls, overgrown weeds everywhere. The entire compound was swallowed by thick forest. No signboard, no workers, no cars, no company, nothing, just silence, terrifying silence. The bike rider stopped slowly. "Oga," he whispered, "this place bad." My hands started shaking. My mind raced wildly. Who sent that message? Why bring me here? Was it kidnappers, ritualists, armed robbers, human traffickers, or who? Suddenly, every horror story I've ever heard flooded my mind at once. The abandoned building looked like death itself. I noticed strange movement inside the bushes nearby. Branches shifting, leaves rustling. My breathing became faster. The bike rider brought out a small paper quickly. "Take my number," he said nervously. "If anything happens, call me. If you need my help, call me." I collected it with trembling fingers. At that moment, fear completely took over me. The rider suddenly started turning his back around. He wanted to leave. Panic exploded inside me immediately. "Wait!" I shouted. He accelerated slightly. I don't know where the strength came from, but I ran instantly and dropped back onto the bike before he could move away. "Oga, abeg," I shouted desperately, "don't leave me here." The rider didn't argue. The fear on his own face said everything. He speeded off immediately. As we rushed away from that horrible place, I kept looking back nervously. Every sound from the forest made my heart pound. I honestly believed someone might chase after us. The bike rider drove faster than before. Neither of us spoke much during the return journey. The tension was too heavy. When we finally reached the park again, I nearly collapsed from relief. I paid him immediately. He looked at me seriously. Oga, thank God say you no enter inside. I nodded slightly. My hands were still trembling. Without wasting time, I entered the next available bus, heading back to my state. As the vehicle moved, exhaustion hit me fully. I leaned against the window, staring outside quietly. The fear slowly transformed into realization. If I had gone deeper into that place, maybe I would never return home. Maybe my picture would appear online as another missing person. Maybe my parents would spend years searching for me. Maybe my story would end inside that forest. Tears filled my eyes. For the first time that day, I truly understand how close that death had been. The journey back felt endless. Night had already fallen when I finally reached home. My dad opened the door immediately. The moment he saw my face, his expression changed. What happened? I entered slowly and sat down heavily. Then I narrated everything from beginning to the end. The text message, the strange old woman, the fearful reaction, the lonely road, the abandoned building, everything. When I finished speaking, silence filled the room. My father shook his head slowly. Then he looked upward. Thank you, God. My mother nearly cried. That night, sleep refused to come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the abandoned building again. The thick forest, the silence, the strange warnings, the fear. And I kept asking myself one question. What if? What if the bike rider had abandoned me there? What if I had decided to enter the building? What if kidnappers were waiting outside? What if ritualists had planned everything carefully? The possibilities terrified me deeply. The next morning, I woke up with complete different mindset. For months, I have believed employment was the only path to survival. But after what happened, something inside me changed. I realized desperation can push people into dangerous traps. Hunger can blind people. Frustration can destroy common sense. That fake interview taught me a lesson I will never forget. Sometimes, not getting what you want immediately is actually protection. Sometimes rejection saves lives. Sometimes delay is mercy in disguise. I stopped obsessing over white-collar jobs after that experience. Instead, I began looking for practical skills to learn. Something sustainable, something useful, something that nobody could take away from me. A few weeks later, I joined a friend who repaired phones and small electronics. At first, I felt embarrassed. After graduating from university, this was not the glamorous life I imagined for myself. But gradually, I started appreciating the skill. I learned quickly how to change screens, how to repair charging ports, how to detect faults, how to interact with customers. Once later, I became good enough to handle repairs independently. Then slowly money started coming. Not huge money, but honest money. Money that gave me dignity again. Money that allowed me to stop begging my father constantly. The first day I gave my mother money from my work, tears entered her eyes. My father smiled proudly. You see, he said, every disappointment has purpose. Today, whenever I hear stories about fake job interviews and online scams, I remember that terrifying journey to Umuagwo village. Many young people are desperate and dangerous people know it. They exploit unemployment. They target vulnerable graduates. They promise opportunities only to lure innocent people into traps. Some are kidnapped, some disappear forever, some never make it home. That is why I always tell young people, verify every opportunity carefully. Research companies properly. Never travel blindly because of desperation. And most importantly, listen when something feels wrong. Because sometimes danger announces itself quietly before it strikes. Till today, I still remember that old woman inside the bus. Her rough voice, her strange warnings. Turn back while you still can. At the time, I thought she was mad. But sometimes I wonder, was God trying to warn me through her? I may never know. But one thing is certain. That day changed my life forever. Not because I found a job, but because I escaped something terrible. And sometimes survival itself is the biggest miracle. Thank you guys for watching and for listening. And do have a great day.